Now, here's what we're about to get into, though. Here's what we're about to get into, because, like I said, there was this story. Wait a second here. All right, so what happened was this. What happened was this. We did the podcast last what was that, maybe Sunday or Saturday or something like that. I forget exactly what day it was. And of course, we were talking about the shit that was going on with Stephen A. and how Stephen A. was coming at Jasmine Crockett and whatnot. And I, sometimes what I do is I'll take segments of the show and I'll just make videos of those segments and just put those boys out on YouTube as their own standalone, thing. And oftentimes that's what gains kind of somewhat traction to the podcast, is putting out the other videos that, like, hey, so this is where this comes from, right? And so I got this this comment on the show. I got this comment on the video, and I said that I was going to reply to this comment on the video. But what cemented the reason why I was going to reply to this video, or at least this comment, while I was on the mic, as opposed to just going back and forth with this, this person in the comment section, was Stephen A. Smith went on the Pivot podcast just recently, and he echoed some of the exact same things that this person is saying in the comments of that video, that was about Stephen A. pissing off everybody, because he essentially pissed off a lot of folks going after Jasmine Crockett. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is that I'm going to play Stephen A. Smith's video of what he said on the Pivot podcast that echoed this sentiment, and then we're gonna double back. Okay, so let me go ahead and pull this up so you guys can see right along with your man Spann. Hold on a second here while I do this here. Wait a second. All right, so here's the video of Stephen A. Smith on the Pivot podcast. So let me pull this up so you guys can see. And this is sort of like a short or something like that, so it's not like a very long video. But let's listen to what the fuck Stephen A. is talking about right here. Check this out.
Me and they say, why do I come at Democrats like that? Because I feel like black folks have been played like suckers. You come in 1964, you put the Voting Rights Act into place, and what does Lyndon B. Johnson gets quoted as saying? He said, we sit up there and pass this legislation, the Negroes will be voting for us for the next 200 years. Well, it's about 60 plus. Evidently, he was right, because what has happened? We ain't even talking policies. You look at Trump behavior, and if you think about voting that way, you a sellout. Well, here's the problem with that. So I gotta go this way, right? Remember that identity politics? You're supposed to be for us, right? You want to focus on immigration. You want to focus on the borders, right? You want to focus on the LGBTQ plus community, right? Including transgenders, right? Well, hello, what about the black folks that put y'all in this position all of these years? What about us? You care about us? Care about our issues? Does it matter to you what we going through? Because it doesn't seem to matter. You talk about identity politics. Some dude, Liam Thomas, I believe that was his name, that was at the University of Pennsylvania. When you're a man, you 400th in the world in swimming. And then you decide that you're going to change your gender or whatever, and you number one. Well, by doing so, is that fair to women? But we couldn't talk about that at that particular time because of the people who were in office. Some people look at me and they say, why do I come at Democrats?
All right. So that was the first pass. I'm gonna let that shit play the first pass. I ain't gonna say nothing on the first pass. Okay. Now, hold on. I'm gonna bring this back. But like I said, there was someone in my comment section who had something to say about what it was with my criticism of Stephen A. from the previous video. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this up so you guys can see this comment section, this comment. All right. Now, the comment is, why are all black people required to think alike? Why are all black people required to vote Democrat? Is it because Joe Biden instructed us that if you don't vote Democrat, you ain't black? Is this a true statement? All kidding aside, I'm starting to believe that any dissenting opinion of the 92% will get you canceled out of the black race. Black people are the only demographic to give over 90% of their support to one party. No other racial group does this. Pledging unwavering allegiance to one party hasn't gotten us anywhere in over 50 years. The Republicans know that they can ignore us and still get elected. The Democrats know that they can continue to make empty promises, do nothing for us, and will always have over 92% of our vote. Lyndon Johnson said the quiet part out loud in 1963, and it still resonates today. These Negroes are getting pretty uppity these days, and that's a problem for us since they got something now they have never had before, the political pull to back up their uppityness. Now we got to do something about this. We've got to give them a little something, just enough to quiet them down, not enough to make a difference. I'll have them niggas voting Democrat for the next 200 years. Let's continue to have groupthink and silence any dissenting voices like Stephen A., who is not on code. Now, I've seen this sentiment being expressed often. We all see this, especially in regards to how, like this last presidential election and how, not even just the last one, the one prior to this one. Y'all remember like these motherfuckers like Tariq Nasheed was going around telling y'all about tangibles and all this. We need to withhold our black vote, and by withholding our black vote, they gotta come to us with and give us some tangibles. We need to be able to tangibly see what they doing for black folks, this, that, and the other. Right? Now, the interesting thing about the whole tangibles movement shit was that it's fucking illegal. Right? It is fucking illegal for any legislation to only designate benefits for one group of folk within the United States. It's fucking illegal, right? It's fucking illegal. And so, like, I remember people talking about, well, Kamala Harris didn't say she wasn't going to do anything specifically for black folks. Kamala Harris couldn't tell you that she was going to do anything specifically for black folks because Kamala Harris, being a lawyer, knew that the shit was fucking illegal. It's illegal. They cannot give you legislation specifically for one group of people, right? But here's the thing. As he says this about Lyndon Baines Johnson and, as his comment section comment says the same thing about Lyndon Baines Johnson, it had me look up, damn, did Lyndon Baines Johnson really say that? Because I know there was this one quote that was attributed to Lyndon Baines Johnson in regards to the South. But did Lyndon Baines Johnson say something about he gonna have the niggas voting for Democrats for 200 years? And so I looked it up, and this is what came up, man. I mean, some of y'all may not necessarily like Googles anymore. I do my Googles. I try to find different sources and where my shit is at. But this is what came up. In their AI overview, let me make sure that it's clear about that. It says the statement, I'll have them niggas voting Democratic for 200 years, is an alleged quote attributed to Lyndon Baines Johnson, but its authenticity is highly disputed. While some sources claim he said it, there is no definitive documentary evidence, such as an official transcript or recording to prove that he did say that. Okay? Now, they said the context of this particular claim was the alleged comment is said to have been made after the passage of the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964. It is often cited as evidence that Johnson was a cynical political operator who used civil rights legislation to gain the black vote for the Democratic Party rather than out of genuine moral conviction. Now, here's the thing. This is the quote that I actually did remember hearing, and this is attributed to one Bill Moyers, who was a former aide of Lyndon Baines Johnson back then. He says a similar but confirmed quote from Johnson's offers an important contrast. A former aide, Bill Moyers, recalled that after signing the Civil Rights Act, Johnson said, I think we've just delivered the South to the Republican Party for the rest of my life and yours. This remark highlights his genuine fear that prioritizing civil rights would cost the Democratic Party the segregationist votes of the South, a prediction that largely came true. Okay? And so what happened was this. Lyndon Baines Johnson signs the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Okay? He also therefore went on to sign the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and I believe it was the Fair Housing Act of 1968. Those all came at great cost to Democrats in southern states. Now, why would those come at great cost to Democrats in southern states, you would ask, right? So Republicans go out of their way to remind us that it was the Democrats who were members of the KKK, that it was the Democrats who were all about, being about segregation and subjugating the black folks. And to some degree, they were correct, right? They were correct in that. They're not telling you a lie in saying that that's how the Democrats operated in that time, because that's exactly how they operated in that time. And I've said on this podcast, you probably heard it many other places before, that is not how the Democratic Party operates today. This isn't our granddaddy's Democratic Party, nor is this our granddaddy's Republican Party. Shit's changed since then. Shit's changed a lot since then. So when Republicans go out of their way to tell you that, hey, it was Lincoln that freed the slaves, and Lincoln was a Republican, then why is these people in the South who are voting Republican and voting for Donald Trump carrying around the battle flag of the people that wanted to keep my people locked down? Make that make sense to me. Now, it doesn't make sense if you don't know the history. But when you understand the history, then you understand, like, oh, so this is why the fuck y'all get to be this while trying to tell me something else, because they're trying to make sure that you don't know the history either. All right. For those of you who are not familiar, I'm sure you probably heard of the Daughters of the Confederacy, the United Daughters of the Confederacy, who went on a decades-long crusade to reimagine and rewrite the history of the Civil War, to make sure that the civil rights people, the Confederacy was being memorialized and lionized in a way where they wouldn't be seen as traitors to this nation, where we have schools that are named after Confederates, that we have monuments that are out here built in the name of Confederates, that we have roads in the name of Confederates. All of these people were traitors to this fucking nation. The United Daughters of the Confederacy and their advocacy for, being able to rewrite that history has kind of led to them to be able to do that. Okay. But we're going to go back, though. We're going to go back. And I'm gonna pull Stephen A. back up. Okay, I'm gonna pull Stephen A. back up, because I think it's important that we go back and we start, we kind of dissect what he's saying in real time. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull Stephen A.'s ass, his raggedy ass, back on up, and let's dissect what the fuck he's saying real quick. Let me do that. Here we go.
Democrats like that, because I feel like black folks have been played like suckers. You come in 1964, you put the Voting Rights Act into place, and what does Lyndon B. Johnson gets quoted as saying? He said, we sit up there and pass this legislation, the Negroes will be voting for us for the next 200 years.
Now, we just established that may not even be a real quote, right? Stephen A. Smith credits himself for being a journalist. Does he even know if that quote is real? Has he looked that up at all? Because we were looking it up. We can't find anywhere where it's actually documented. Even if we were to grant that it was true, it came as a result of giving black people civil rights. This came after he signed legislation to put black people on par with white people as far as just being able to exist in this nation, if we were to grant this to be true. Think about that for a second. Yeah, Lyndon Baines Johnson was a racist piece of shit. Any historian worth their salt, and any person who is objective and true to the true story of shit knows that he was a racist. But also, the complicated thing about this history is that, like, this racist gave us these fucking civil rights. You can be objective about it. Now, the thing is, like I said, Stephen A. is supposed to be a fucking journalist. He's saying that This is what Lyndon Baines Johnson said. Right now, we can't even establish if that was even a real quote. In much the same way that like people go around still talking about the Willie Lynch quote unquote letter that isn't real. And we're not gonna get into that today, but yeah.
Well, it's about 60 plus. Evidently, he was right, because what has happened? We ain't even talking policies. You look at Trump behavior, and if you think about voting that way, you a sellout.
Yeah, so we talk policy here on Mr. Spann Official. We talk policy here. And when it comes to the policies that Donald Trump has been enacting, when it comes to the political priorities that Donald Trump has been prioritizing, we see that Donald Trump is trying to eradicate the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment, which is the amendment that gave black people citizenship here in the United States of America. The 14th Amendment was one of the three Reconstruction amendments. The 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment. The 13th Amendment was the one that abolished slavery. Somewhat. If you were involved in a crime, they could, legally enslave you again, which is why you have what we would call incarcerated slaves, right? Many people who are doing work in the prison system are essentially slaves working as slaves in the prison system. But the 13th Amendment officially, quote unquote, officially abolished slavery. The 14th Amendment is what gave black people citizenship. Now, the Trump administration will tell you that they're trying to get rid of the anchor babies. These people are coming over to this nation and they trying to, they use our laws to become citizens. And even though that they're not real citizens, but they keep they babies as citizens. And because they're here and they babies as citizens, then they get to stay in this and the other. And to many people who don't know that 14th Amendment is what gave black people citizenship, they're like, yeah, let's get rid of that. Now, no one, I'm like, yeah. They get rid of your black ass citizenship too. Okay. And then the 15th Amendment is what gave black men the right to vote. Okay. So the 13th Amendment abolished slavery. The 14th Amendment gave us citizenship. And the 15th Amendment gave black men the right to vote. Women still weren't given the right to vote yet. So it was only black men who were given the right to vote. These were what we call the Reconstruction, the Reconstruction Amendments. All right. So the Reconstruction Amendments gave us the right to vote, gave us citizenship, and abolished slavery. Right. Right after that happened, there was a faction of the Republican Party. Despite the fact that the Republican Party was filled with abolitionists and people who were against the whole thing about slavery, but you had people in the South who were Republicans like, all right, yeah, okay, so we done did all these things for these black folks. Fuck, man, like, haven't we done enough? Haven't we done enough? And those haven't we done enough people are where the lily white Republicans come from, okay? That's where they come from. So we're gonna move and we're gonna read a little bit from about the Lily White movement. We get this from Wikipedia. All right. So let me go ahead and pull Stephen A down for a second here. We're gonna come back to Stephen in a minute. It says, but the Lily White movement was an anti-black political movement within the Republican Party in the United States in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It was a response. It was a response to the political and socioeconomic gains made by African Americans following the Civil War and the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, which eliminated slavery and involuntary servitude except as punishment for a crime. During Reconstruction, black leaders in the South gained influence in the Republican Party by organizing black people as an important voting bloc via union leagues and the biracial black and tan faction of the Republicans. Conservative whites, again, even to this day, conservative whites don't mean black people no good. If you're a conservative white, chances are the policies that you champion come at the expense of me and my people. Okay? Conservative whites attempted to eliminate this influence and recover white voters who had defected to the Democratic Party. The Lily White movement proved successful through the South, and it was a key factor in the growth of the Republican Party in the region. Immediately following the war, all of the southern states enacted black codes, laws intended specifically to curtail the rights of the newly freed African Americans. Many northern states enacted their own black codes, restricting and barring black immigration. The Civil Rights Act of 1866, however, nullified most of these laws, and the Freedmen's Bureau was able to regulate many of the affairs of Southern black men, who were granted the right to vote in 1867. Groups such as the Union League and the Radical Republicans sought total equality and complete integration of black people into American society. The Republican Party itself held significant power in the South during Reconstruction because of the federal government's role. Okay? But again, they didn't stay there. They didn't stay there. During Reconstruction, Union Leagues were formed across the South after 1867 as all black working auxiliaries of the Republican Party. They were secret organizations that mobilized freedmen to register to vote and to vote Republican. They discussed political issues, promoted civic projects, and mobilized workers opposed to certain employers. Most branches were segregated, but few were integrated. The leaders of the all-black units were mostly urban black people from the North who had never been enslaved. Historian Foner reports. By the end of 1867, it seemed that virtually every black voter in the South had enrolled in the Union League, the Loyal League, or some equivalent local political organization. Meetings were generally held in a black church or school. Okay? Now, here's the downfall of the black Republicans. By 1890, with a few exceptions, the Democratic Party had gained control of all the state legislatures in the South. From 1890 to 1908, southern states accomplished disenfranchisement of black people and in some states, many poor whites. From 1901 through 1928, no black people served in the U.S. Congress due to their disenfranchisement across the South. In 1928, Oscar DePriest was elected U.S. Representative from Illinois. Black leaders were barred in 1922 from the Virginia Republican Congressional Convention. The state had imposed racial segregation in public places, and disenfranchised most black people by this time. At the national level, the Republican Party made some attempts to respond to black interests. In 1920, Republicans made opposition to lynching part of their platform in the National Convention. Lynchings of black women and men in the South had increased in the decades around the turn of the 20th century. Leonidas Dwyer, a white Republican representative from St. Louis, worked with the NAACP to introduce an anti-lynching bill into the House, where he gained strong passage in 1922. One of the black and tan partisans who continued to hold appointed office was Walter Cohen of New Orleans, the customs inspector, and later comptroller of customs. He gained appointments from 4 Republican presidents and continued through office through the Calvin Coolidge administration. Now, understand that the Lily White movement was a result of black advancement. The backlash that happened after the ascension of black people after the eradication of slavery. So in 8 years, black people went from being slaves to being congressmen and being senators across the South. White people were losing their fucking minds over it. And in some pockets of the Republican Party back then, that was a bridge too far. And many of them defected to becoming Democrats then. Okay? So even then, in the Republican Party, there were racists within the Republican Party who had no fucking thing. They had no affinity towards helping black people advance at all. It was a bridge too far for them, so much so that they defected to the Democratic Party, right? Now, again, we talked about how the Democratic Party was a party of slavery, and it was the Democrats who was members of the KKK. And I would because I'm an honest broker, I will tell you, yes, that was true historically. That was true historically. But how do we come to this flip? Right? How do we come to this flip? So you've already got the Lily White movement after Reconstruction in the late 19th century to the early 20th century, right? We already got that. We've already established that. Now, hold on. Let's go back to what Stephen A. was saying, though. Hold on. Let me pull that back up. Let's go back to what Stephen A. was talking about. Here we go. Let me do this here. All right. Here we go. Let's see. Let's go back to see what the fuck he talking about. He said, because if you vote for Donald Trump, you will sell out.
Well, here's the problem with that. So I gotta go this way, right? Remember that identity politics? You're supposed to be for us, right? You want to focus on immigration. You want to focus on the borders, right? You want to focus on the LGBTQ plus community, right? Including transgenders, right? Well, hello, what about the black folks that put y'all in this position all of these years? What about us?
Now, here's the other thing I think is very important to say is that there's this thing called intersectionality. You can be a part of one group and another group at the same time. You can be black and you can be an immigrant. You can be black and you can be of the LGBTQ community. You can be black and you can be of the trans community. Like there, just because you are part of one group doesn't mean you can't be a part of the other. In some ways, policy affects you in different, no matter how it comes, because of where your particular situation intersects with the policy. So when I hear someone like Stephen A., a college-educated man, a journalist, talk about, I feel like black people have been played and set aside the policies. If I vote for Donald Trump, I'm a sellout. And it's like, nigga, are you not paying attention to the policy? Because it's not as if black people are not paying attention to the policy. And this is the thing. This right here, the idea that black people are not paying attention to the policy, this is the part that I find the most insulting. This is what I find insulting, because essentially what you're saying is that black people aren't politically savvy enough to understand how these policies affect us, and that we vote based on a team rather than the policies and how they will affect us. This is the most insidious shit that permeates political commentary, is that black people are voting for the Democrats out of pure loyalty and not political expediency. Black people understand the politics more than probably anybody, because we understand that if we get shit that we want, guess what? It's going to benefit every motherfucking body. And if we don't get the shit that we want, guess what? Everybody gonna get fucked up besides a select few. Right? Which is why it's important for those in power right now to make us feel as though your vote don't matter. What you going to the polls for? Your vote don't matter. You live in a blue state, man. Shit, whoever they vote for, that's what's gonna happen. Like, nah. Meanwhile, Republicans in Louisiana at this very moment are arguing at the Supreme Court to gut what's left of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. That's policy. That's policy the Republicans are championing right now. Right now, Republicans are telling you, yeah, your history doesn't really matter. So yeah, we getting rid of like all these Black History Month, Gay Pride Month, all these things that will highlight the accomplishments of these marginalized groups. Yeah, we getting rid of that. We don't do that no more. Yeah, many of the people who have, gained prominent positions within the government, they're probably the first general or the first admiral of color in this particular area. We don't want your kind in the military anymore. We getting rid of you motherfuckers. This is policy. This is stated policy right now. So it's not just Donald Trump's behavior, nigga. It's the policy that affects people in a very real way. When the policy is telling folks that, hey, these consent decrees that the Justice Department would use to get police departments in line after violating the civil rights of its citizens, yeah, we don't do that no more. Yeah, we don't do that no more. Yeah, go ahead, do what the fuck y'all want to these people. Did we not just see that happen in Chicago on the South Side in South Shore? When Donald Trump sending them fucking ICE agents into a black neighborhood with Black Hawk helicopters descending upon that apartment building, where he was separating black parents from their children, where they were grabbing people out of their apartments in the middle of the night, where they were ransacking their motherfucking apartments. Did we not just watch that happen? I mean, come on. This is all policy. What are you talking about, nigga?
Care about us? Care about our issues? Does it matter to you what we going through? Because it doesn't seem to matter. You talk about identity politics. Some dude, Liam Thomas, I believe that was his name, that was at the University of Pennsylvania. When you're a man, you 400th in the world in swimming. And then you decide that you're going to change your gender or whatever, and you number one.
I told y'all a while ago, they use that issue. Like Republicans use that issue to perfection. They perfected that shit. Think about this for a second. A few years ago, I want to say about maybe 10 years ago, Republicans were trying to make transgenderism a political winner for themselves. And they started off with the bathroom bans, right? That you had to go to the bathroom with which you were, designated as a child. When you were born, you got to go to the bathroom that you were told to go to when you was born. So if you was born and we told you was a boy, you got to go to the male bathroom. You was born and we told you was a girl, you got to go to that bathroom, right? And what happened? You had entities like the NBA taking all-star games away from the state of North Carolina. Basketball tournaments from the NCAA and the NBA were removed from the state. I believe even even Georgia tried to do something similar, and that they lost a Major League Baseball all-star game or some shit like that. And so it wasn't a politically viable fucking position to hold back then. It was just seen as the blatant discrimination that it was. Many people weren't even thinking about transgenders and where they went to the bathroom, because people just like, hey man, I got to go to the bathroom, right? And they lost big time on that. Business interests was not really fucking with the Republicans on that, but they stayed at it, and they stayed at it, and they stayed at it. And then when Leah Thompson, because he said Liam, but then when Leah Thompson tied for 5th, he wasn't number 1, tied for 5th with Riley Gaines, who has made a career out of, who's turned her 5th place with Leah Thompson, the tie that she had for 5th place with Leah Thompson, has turned that into a political career, right? To advocate against transgenders being able to compete in the sports with the sex that they identify as. And then we start seeing legislation pop up across the nation from Republican legislatures to address transgender kids playing in sports that they, identify as. Meanwhile, many of them can't even name a transgender child in their state. They can't name a transgender child participating in any sports in their high school athletics. Can't do it without Googling the shit. So they made the idea of being transgender an outsized issue, despite the fact that there, first of all, very few transgender people. Second of all, very few transgender people who are competing in sports. And then they wrapped it around protecting women and girls. They took this very niche issue and made it a prominent issue for so many. And here you got Stephen A. Smith on a national platform, someone who, again, this man has millions of fucking people who listen to him every day. And he's thinking about, and even he's getting this wrong. As a sports guy, he's getting this wrong. I'm a fucking pipe fitter. He's getting this wrong.
Well, by doing so, is that fair to women? But we couldn't talk about that at that particular time because of the people who were in office.
And so now he's saying we can't talk about that because of who was in office. No, you could talk about it. We're talking about it now. You sound stupid to anybody who's learning or tried to at least be learning on the situation, but you sound stupid. You sound ignorant even now. As a sports guy, you sound ignorant now. because you should have done the research to see, hey, why are we talking about Leah Thomas right now again? She came in 5th with Riley Gaines. She didn't even win the whole damn tournament. So what are we talking about? That means somebody was beating her, right? Right? They were beating her. Did she come close to Katie Ledecky's times at all? No? Then what the fuck are we talking about? What the fuck are we talking about? And so it was this, and the he got to talking about how he was wrong about Kyrie Irving and the vaccine and all this other shit. That was a trip too. But yeah. But here's the thing, right? So I'm gonna go back though, because we're gonna go back into the history of why black people are voting for Republicans. I think we done with the Stephen A. Smith portion of this shit, but why are black people voting Republican so overwhelmingly? Now we already went into the thing with the Lily White movement within the Republican Party that had them moving against moving against the agenda of helping to advance black people and the black plight in America back at the time, right? That wasn't the only thing. So again, Stephen A. Smith alluded to Lyndon Baines Johnson and the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And that's got that was the reason why black people is voting Democrat. But also you got to understand, at the time, Lyndon Baines Johnson wasn't running against himself. Lyndon Baines Johnson was running against one Barry Goldwater. Now, Barry Goldwater was a Republican nominee for president of the United States in 1964. Okay? The Republican nominee who was staunchly against civil rights and civil rights for black folks in 1964. But don't just take my word for it. Let's go back. Let's go listen to what the fuck Barry Goldwater had to say about the Civil Rights Act back then. We get this from PBS.
Well, he was a considerable figure in America, a presidential candidate, of course.
I'm sorry.
But a figure who, by espousing...
Wait a second here. I'm trying to get this maximized so you guys can... Okay, so it won't let me maximize it any bigger. I'm sorry.
Gave political America the sense that we had been entirely drowned by the New Deal. And, of course, Goldwater was unremitting in his opposition to communism, whose defeat he lived to see.
Let me ask you about another aspect of the Goldwater legacy, and it's that Goldwater announces that he won't support the Civil Rights Act. The realignment of the South away from the Democratic Party for the first time since the Civil War happened in that election in 1964. And there is a criticism that I know you're aware of from the left that actually the conservative movement has, and this is the kindest assertion, is that it has provided safe haven for racism in the United States. And I wonder if, how you reconcile this and whether there isn't some truth to this.
Well, it's a complicated topic.
No, it's not.
I think we have to look first at Goldwater. Goldwater was not a racist. He desegregated the Senate cafeteria. He was a founding member of the Arizona chapter of the NAACP. But he opposed the Civil Rights Act for constitutional reasons. It wasn't out of cultural or racial reasons. That said, there were other people on the right who did oppose civil rights acts, including the acts under Eisenhower in the 50s, for those cultural and racial reasons. And I think there we can see a legacy of bigotry, a legacy that William F. Buckley Jr. eventually repudiated, but I think still has haunted the conservative movement to the present day.
The fact that, okay, so this isn't exactly what the fuck I thought it was. However, the fact that the fact that these folks can't come to grips with the fact that, they're trying to give him some great. Well, he helped found the Arizona chapter of the NAACP, and he desegregated the Senate lunchroom and this, that, and the other. But yeah, his policies, by and large, the policies that he supported would have kept black people subjugated, right? And he was the major opponent of the Civil Rights Act. He was the Republican presidential candidate, and we wouldn't have the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We probably don't get the Voting Rights Act of 1965. We probably don't get the Fair Housing Act of 1968 if Barry Goldwater is president of the United States and Lyndon Baines Johnson isn't. Right? So the tangibles that one Tariq Nasheed would ask you, what were the tangibles? Those were the tangibles, right? Now, here's the other part. Tangibly, you have the right to vote. Tangibly, you have the right by law to move wherever the fuck it is you want to move. Tangibly, by law, you can't be discriminated against because of the color of your skin. Now, tangibly, you should be able to go out there and vote for candidates who support your political ideology. You should be able to go to the voting booth and vote for someone who is going to uplift your community. Meanwhile, the opposite side is going after your ability to do just that. They're going after the laws that have given you the ability to advocate politically in this nation for yourself and your community, right? So let's go to the story here, right? Let's go to the story here because I've alluded to this already, but I'm going to allude to it again. The U.S. Supreme Court conservatives appear willing to blunt key Voting Rights Act provision. The U.S. Supreme Court's conservative justice signaling their willingness to, on Wednesday, to undercut another key section of the Voting Rights Act, the landmark 1965 federal law enacted by Congress to prevent racial discrimination in voting. Questions they posed during arguments in a major case involving Louisiana electoral districts reflected an interest in curbing the Voting Rights Act Section 2, which bars voting maps that will result in diluting the clout of minorities, even without direct proof of racist intent. The court, with a 6-3 conservative majority in recent years, has moved American law dramatically rightward. Republicans currently hold a slim majority in the U.S. House of Representatives, and a decision gutting the Section 2 could benefit them. Okay? What the fuck, man? While the conservative justice seemed united in their skepticism towards this provision, exactly how they might depart from its current application was unclear. Some seem focused on making it harder to prove claims under Section 2, while others signaled opposition to any consideration of race in the drawing of legislative districts, even to remedy a Section 2 violation. Still, others suggested phasing out the provision's remedial role. The fact that there are Republicans and conservatives right now attacking the Civil Rights Act, but the Voting Rights Act of 1965 should send a chill down your spine, especially if you live in the South. Because essentially what they're trying to do is they're trying to be able to draw up these maps that would give Republicans control of the Congress into perpetuity, where they won't necessarily be beholden to you. They get to pick who their voters are, not the other way around. Also understand that if you look at how the Republicans are governing right now, they're not very popular. Republicans have they have the House of Representatives, they have the Senate, they have the Supreme Court, they have the White House, and yet the government is shut down and people are being forced to go to work and not get paid. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is knocking down part of the East Wing of the White House and putting up a fucking ballroom that nobody fucking asked for. Also saying that the Justice Department owes him $230 million for investigating him when he was out here doing his criminal shit when he wasn't president. If the Republicans are able to maintain control of the House, Donald Trump isn't going to be held to account. But if the Democrats are able to get in control of the House, then suddenly some of this shit that's been going on, we can kind of put a blunt to it. We can check that. But if the Supreme Court guts this Voting Rights Act, this portion of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, suddenly you're going to see a bunch of Republican states start redrawing all of their maps. And they're going to start drawing out black districts. They're going to start gerrymandering their voters, where where the voters align with them, not so much the voters picking who they want. This is what they're doing right now. That's policy, Stephen A. That's policy. But going back into the history. So oftentimes we hear about the Republicans, we hear sometimes, like we talked about the Lily White movement. Oftentimes we don't necessarily hear about, sometimes we hear about the Dixiecrats, but the Dixiecrats were essentially the ones who were really about that racism life. Okay? The Dixiecrats were the ones who was like, nah, equal rights, fuck that. Absolutely not. Okay? They actually became their own faction within the Democratic Party. Much like Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema kind of did, where they call them Blue Dog Democrats now. These were those motherfuckers, right? But the Dixiecrats were led by one Strom Thurmond. Okay, Strom Thurmond was a, did he come out of South Carolina? I want to say South Carolina. But he came up with the Dixiecrats. He was the leader of the Dixiecrats. And they formed around 1948. Okay? And this was in response to Harry Truman integrating the armed forces, because they didn't want black people fighting alongside white folks in these wars. And so when Harry Truman decided to integrate the armed forces, yeah, a lot of those Dixiecrats, they was pissed, man. They was pissed. So we're going to read. And it says the States Rights Democratic Party. This is what they would call the States Rights Democratic Party. Also colloquially referred to as the Dixiecrat Party, was a short-lived segregationist states' rights and old Southern Democratic political party in the United States, actively primarily in the South. It arose due to a Southern regional split in opposition to the National Democratic Party. After President Harry S. Truman, the leader of the Democratic Party, ordered integration in the military in 1948 and other actions to address civil rights of African Americans, including the first presidential proposal for comprehensive civil and voting rights. Many Southern white politicians who objected to this organized themselves as a breakaway faction. They wished to protect the ability of states to decide on racial segregation. Its members were referred to as Dixiecrats, portmanteau of Dixie referring to the Southern United States and Democrat. In the 1930s, a political realignment occurred largely due to the New Deal policies of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Many Democrats in the South supported substantial economic intervention. Civil rights for African Americans were not specifically incorporated within the New Deal agenda, due in part to the Southern control over many key positions of power within the U.S. Congress. Supporters assumed control of the state Democratic parties in part or in full in several Southern states. They opposed racial integration, and they wanted to retain Jim Crow laws and other aspects of de jure and de facto racial discrimination. On non-racial issues, they had heterogeneous beliefs. Despite the Dixiecrat success in several states, Truman was narrowly reelected after the 1948 election. His leaders generally returned to the Democratic Party, or at least for a time. Although Dixiecrats weakened Democratic identity among Southern voters, the Dixiecrat standard bearer, Strom Thurmond of South Carolina, eventually switched to the Republican Party in 1964 in opposition to national civil rights legislation. Strom Thurmond died in our lifetime, like in my lifetime. I believe he was 100 years old when Strom Thurmond died. And then on top of that, we find out that Strom Thurmond had a whole ass black daughter. So the leader of the Dixiecrat movement, the staunchly racist wing of the Democratic Party at the time, was also, dibbling and dabbling with the sisters. Make that make sense. Okay? But you would have a lot of Republicans tell you that, like, the switch never happened. Well, there was never a switch. Candace Owens goes around and she says silly shit like that. The switch never happened. And I always come back to this question. If the switch never happened, then how do you find Republicans arguing on the side of conserving what was that? Confederate monuments? Why do we have the current Secretary of Defense reinstating names on bases for Confederate generals? Why do we have the current Secretary of Defense trying to whitewash, Black history from the learning from the classes at some of these our military academies? What is the purpose of that? These are the Republicans now that are doing that. So if you're going to tell me, if you want to be honest about it, like if the switch never happened, then what the fuck? How the fuck do the Republicans find themselves on this end of it? Make that make sense. So you got the Lily White movement, you got the Dixiecrats, who essentially became Republicans later on in response to the legislation that Lyndon Baines Johnson put forth with the 64 Voting Rights Act. I'm sorry, with the 64 Civil Rights Act, with the 65 Voting Rights Act, and with the 68 Fair Housing Act. Okay? Policy. But it's not just that. How do black people find themselves voting for Democrats in the high clips that we find ourselves voting for Democrats? Here's another reason. Because we're not dumb. And we understand that some things happen by design. And we also understand that niggas think we stupid and think they talking in code when we see the game, when we see the play right from the jump. So I'll have you know that there's this man, and we played this video before here on the Mr. Spann Official Podcast and the Spann Report Podcast Network when it was the Spann Report Podcast, man. But we talking about, you got Lee Atwater, who was a Republican operative. He worked under Richard Nixon, worked really well with Roger Stone, who is a really big Donald Trump supporter today. I believe Donald Trump even pardoned this motherfucker for some shit, because Roger Stone is always involved in some bullshit. You know what I mean? But Lee Atwater basically kind of gave the game away when he talked about how Republicans talk about the policies that are going to negatively affect black people, while also not really saying that it's going to negatively affect black people, right? So let me go ahead and pull this up so you guys can listen right along with your mans. But let's listen to Lee Atwater talk shit about how they do the coded stuff. All right, so the caption, for those of you not watching, it says, in 1981, the legendarily brutal campaign consultant Lee Atwater was working in Ronald Reagan's White House when he was interviewed by Alexander Lamas. All right. And then it says, in this audio made public for the first time ever, Atwater lays out how Republicans can win the vote of racist without sounding racist themselves. All right, so let's listen to Lee Atwater talk his shit.
Here's how I would approach that issue as a statistician or a political scientist, or no, as a psychologist, which I'm not, is how abstract you handle the race thing. In other words, you start out, and now y'all aren't quoting me on this. All right, I won't hear it. You start out in 1954 by saying nigger, nigger, nigger. By 1968, you can't say nigger. That hurts your backfire. So you say stuff like force busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract now. You're talking about cutting taxes and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things. And the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites.
Now, where are we seeing that now? You're talking all these abstract things. You're talking tax cuts and everything else, but then the end result is blacks get hurt worse than whites. Didn't we just pass one of the biggest tax cuts in the history of this nation not too long ago? Aren't we now seeing like the disinvestment in our infrastructure? Are we now seeing the disinvestment in our education department? They're trying to dismantle the education department. And they're trying to privatize the collection of student loans. How many of our people are dealing with that? Meanwhile, it doesn't sound racist, but it disproportionately affects black people. This was said over 40 fucking years ago. They're still doing it. Still doing it.
And subconsciously, maybe that is part of it. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that if it is getting that abstract and that coded, that we're doing away with the racial problem one way or the other. You follow me? Because obviously sitting around saying we want to cut taxes, we want to cut this, and we want is much more abstract than even the busing thing. And a hell of a lot more abstract than nigger, you know.
Yeah, so they don't have to say the racist part. They could just, code it into something else while negatively affecting your constituency. So again, we going back, like Stephen, they talking about it despite the policy, we just talking about how Donald Trump acts. Like, no, nigga. Many of us understand that Donald Trump's policies also affect us in a fucked up ass way. How many people who are on public assistance may go without being able to feed their kids because of Donald Trump's non-desire to even negotiate with Democrats about what we gonna do about these healthcare subsidies that are set to expire and people's healthcare insurance is about to spike? He ain't showing you no interest that he cares a fuck about that, but he has told you, y'all, hey, we gonna get $20 billion to Argentina and buy their beef. Meanwhile, the farmers are like, what the fuck? Hey, I'm gonna go ahead and spend $250 million on this ballroom that nobody asked for. Oh yeah, that's right. And give me $230 million for the Justice Department because they was investigating me, and I don't like the fact that the Justice Department was investigating me, and I get to make the choice of whether or not I get that money back. So yeah, y'all gonna give me $230 million, and yeah, we gonna do that. Yeah. Oh, but I ain't taking a salary though. So yeah, it's a wash, right? It's all fucking policy, Stephen A. Now, and also to that person who's in my comment section talking about black people voting for Democrats all this time, it's because black people understand. Let me go ahead and bring this shit home. Black people understand that the policies of the Republican Party offer us nothing. Most of the people that you see, black people that you see voting for Republicans, many times they will say stupid shit to you like this. Hey, what have the Democrats done for us lately? But they never ask the question, what are the Republicans offering? They never answer that question, or never are they presented with it. What is the Republican Party offering black voters? Other than to say y'all different from the Democrats. Meanwhile, your policy says that everything that we stand for, y'all don't really fuck with. Y'all are trying to erode our ability to go to the polls. Many of the section of the Voting Rights Act that they are trying to gut is about the maps. Over 10 years ago, they had already gutted the ability for states to, they had gutted the part of the Voting Rights Act that prevented states from being able to make changes to their voting laws without pre-clearance from the federal government. So they're slowly eroding at your ability to even cast your ballot. But you want me to consider these motherfuckers for office? Ask yourself that question. Y'all are so fucking independent. What are these people offering black people as an alternative to the Democratic Party? Because again, black people voted Republican at one point in time because it was politically expedient for black people to vote Republican at that time. Black people are now voting Democratic because it's politically expedient for black people to vote Democratic at this time. One is openly antagonistic to everything black people stand for. The other one is just like, y'all are part of the coalition. But black people have to make a choice of harm mitigation. We mitigating harm more often than not when we go to the ballot. I'm thinking about shit outside of my existence when I go to the polls. It's not just about me when I go to the polls. I could think about this for a second. I pay a lot of money in taxes. I do. I don't like it, but it's the reality of my situation. largely I vote for Democrats who are about, the taxes and whatnot. I stand to benefit from tax cuts to some degree. Not like in nowhere near close to what these motherfuckers is getting, but I stand to benefit a little bit. I make a nice little money, right? I work hard for my money, but I ain't happy when I see my check and I'm like, God damn, why they get so much, right? But at the same time, I understand that those funds go to the roads, to the schools, to the social safety net. I also remember the fact that I was a kid on welfare who benefited from that cheese and from that peanut butter and from the farina and things of that nature. I recognize where I come from and like, hey, I'm paying it back. There may come a time, God forbid, I may end up finding myself in a situation where like, yo, man, I need that help again. Hopefully that help will be there if I need it. Right? But far too many of us, some of us who do have means, find ourselves thinking we'll never be back in that position. It ain't gonna never happen to me. And then, so now you're looking down on the people who need that help. Not me. Not your boy. And so that's why it's so frustrating. That's why it's so frustrating when you see black people who are struggling. Some of the people I used to love, bro, who voted for that. And they think it's just about a difference of opinion. It's like, no, nigga, this is about life and death. This is about our existence as a people. This is about our subjugation as a people. These people have been doing this for years. They never fucking stopped. They have been trying to erode everything that made us equal to them from the very beginning, and they're on the precipice of doing it. And the unfortunate part about it is some of our people are willing to help. So when I see the question, what have black people gotten for voting for the Democratic Party? We got the right to vote. We got the right to our being able to be, treated equal. We got the right to move how we want to move. What we do with that is of our own volition. But voting for a party that offers you nothing just for the sake of voting for a party that's different from what you may have been voting for before, despite the fact that they're offering you nothing, is idiotic, stupid, moronic, imbecilic thinking. I say in my intro, I could never vote for somebody who thinks relating to me is voting with a felon. I'm not a felon. Our president is. I haven't been convicted of anything 34 times. Our president has. He is not offering you anything of substance. You think that all of the things he's going to do is going to affect someone else. And everyone who thought that he was just going to affect someone else got the shock of their lives when they figured out, oh shit, that shit he talking about gonna touch me too. Shout out to those federal workers who voted for him. Shout out to those farmers who voted for him. Shout out to those Republicans in red states who get all the welfare who voted for him. Shout out to those people who are in red states who voted for him, whose kids' after-school program has been cut because they've cut the funding for the Department of Education. They're offering you nothing. And yet, you want to give me a quote allegedly from Lyndon Baines Johnson about black people voting for the Democratic Party for the next 200 years, despite the fact that the Republicans have offered you jack shit. Make that makes sense. From the Lily White movement to the Dixiecrats to the Trump movement of today, from Democrat to Republican, they have been against your black ass the entire time. I don't ever want to hear about black people voting for the Democratic Party and why we voting for the Democratic Party so much when the Republicans offer you jack shit. Also, as an aside, for those of you who would say, well, what about the Green Party? What about some of these third parties or whatever? Where the fuck are they right now? Where is the Green Party right now? Where is Jill Stein right now? Those motherfuckers are political cicadas. They show up every 4 years, make a lot of noise, siphon votes, and disappear. And we won't see them again until 2028. Mark my words. You ain't seeing them in making no grassroots efforts towards, building up coalitions and, propping up candidates across, the country for Congress or Senate or anything else. You're not seeing that. You're not seeing any of these motherfuckers. You're not seeing it. So don't even come at me with the third party shit until they show themselves up as a viable option where we're seeing them in this time. You're not even seeing them in this time. As fucked up as everything is going right now, you're not seeing them in this time. This is the time for them to be making their play. But are they? Ask yourself that. Why y'all only show up every 4 years? Why I never hear from you motherfuckers? They like the Olympics, nigga. They only come around every 4 years. I never really hear from them until it's time to vote. And siphon votes away. Which is what they did for the last, I want to say since 2000. I remember Ralph Nader with siphoning votes away from Al Gore, and much the way that Jill Stein has been doing for the last 2 elections. They only show up to sow chaos and they bounce. You ain't seen her since. So yeah, man. Don't ask me why black people vote Democratic anymore. Black people vote for political expediency. There is no loyalty to a Democratic Party. There is a party that at least pretends to listen to the concerns of the black people and the LGBTQ community and the Arab community and the brown community. There's a coalition over here. Over there on that other side, it's about whiteness and whiteness only. And they continuously showing you that. Perfect example. Right now. Right fucking now. There was a story that a Trump nominee for the Office of Special Counsel says that the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday should be thrown to the depths of hell. We get this story from Politico. It says that Trump nominee says MLK Jr. holiday belongs in hell and that he has not a Nazi streak according to text messages. He says MLK Jr. was the 1960s George Floyd and his holiday should be ended and tossed into the 7th circle of hell where it belongs. Paul Ingrassia, President Donald Trump's embattled nominee to lead the Office of Special Counsel, told a group of fellow Republicans in a text chain that the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday should be tossed into the 7th circle of hell and that he has a Nazi streak. Ingrassia, who has a Senate confirmation hearing scheduled Thursday, he's since rescinded his own fucking nomination. He dropped out. Made the remarks in a chain with a half dozen Republican operatives and influencers. MLK was the 1960s George Floyd, and his holiday should be ended and tossed into the 7th circle of hell where it belongs. Someone said Jesus Christ in response. Using an Italian surf for black people, Ingrassia wrote a month earlier in the group chat seen by Politico that no Molugulian holidays from Kwanzaa to MLK Jr. Day to Black History Month to Juneteenth, then added every single one of them needs to be eviscerated. Let me go back. He says no Molugulian holidays from Kwanzaa to MLK Jr. Day to Black History Month to Juneteenth. Every single one needs to be eviscerated. Politico interviewed two people in the chat and granted them anonymity after they expressed concerns about personal and professional repercussions. One retained the messages and showed the text chain in its entirety to Politico, which independently verified that the number listed on the chain belongs to Ingrassia. The person said he came forward because he wants the government to be staffed with experienced people who are taken seriously. The second person has since deleted the chain and didn't recall specifics about it, but did confirm that the discussions did take place. A lawyer for Ingrassia, Andrew Planatation, initially suggested that some of the texts were intended to be poking fun at liberals, though he didn't confirm they were authentic. Looks like these texts could be manipulated or are being... Come on, man. Come on, man. Come on, man. Like, nigga, did you know that I can see you? Nigga, you right there. It's on your nose. Come on, man. Come on, man. Even if the texts are authentic, they clearly read as self-deprecating and satirical humor, making fun of the fact that liberals outlandishly and routinely call MAGA supporters Nazis, he wrote in a statement. In reality, Mr. Ingrassia has incredible support from the Jewish community because Jews know that Mr. Ingrassia is the furthest thing from a Nazi. But he didn't say anything about how he had about his support amongst black folks. Here's the current. This is a dude who currently works for Trump. He's not the official over the office of special counsel, but it's also currently working for Trump. This is his attitude about black people. And you want to ask me and question me about why I consider voting for Republicans as a non-starter? Fuck you. It's not about staying on code. It's not about any political sort of fucking loyalty to the Democratic Party. These are the people populating the party of the opposition to me. What do I look like empowering these sons of bitches more? Why would I do that? Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Ask yourself that question. So when someone asks you, why y'all always vote for the Democrats say, hey, what are the Republicans offering you? Just ask them, what are the Republicans offering? And see what they tell you. Because if this is it, the nigga count me out. I don't want no parts. Fuck them niggas. Sincerely, from the bottom of my balls. Real talk.